Welcome to No Apologies. I'm Dana Lash. So great news, America. According to Democrats, you're going to love their Build Back Better. Actually, it's going to end up being about $5 trillion. But this little first stretch is $1.75 trillion spending plan. It's essentially just a giant step towards full-blown, straight-up socialism, which is really the stepping stone to communism. And you support it whether you know it or not. That's at least what Nancy Pelosi says. Watch.
It is a vast bill. It has a lot in it, and we'll have to continue to make sure the public does. But whether they know it or not, they overwhelmingly support it. And by the way, women much more than men.
No. To understand that super bizarre statement from Pelosi, you have to understand that Democrats think you're an idiot. I'm serious. They think you're dumb. And they despise basically any kind of objections because you are just the proletariat, the poor unwashed masses. How dare you question them? Everything that they're doing is demonstrating that this is such. I mean, from the whole not wearing masks when they tell you to not having a vaccine mandate for Congress, yet you have to have a vaccine mandate. And also because they think you're dumb. They say things like, oh, you're going to love something and you totally support it, even though you have no idea what it is or what's in it. Yeah, well, we're on the path to Marxism. That's what this is. And Pelosi knows that you're just going to love it, especially if you are a woman, because sexism. Why do Democrats think women are going to like their Build Back Better plan better than men? Because Democrats want to get women hitched to the federal government. That's right, tie the knot with the state. After all, women need men like fish need a bicycle. Am I right, girls? What the Democrats think women really need is cradle-to-grave government. Uncle Sam wants to be your pimp, ladies. And government is much more dependable, apparently, than the average man. And it always makes its payments on time to support the kids. And even though government dependency is completely a total terrible role model for kids, teaching them to rely on handouts, at least the government doesn't leave the toilet seat up. Right, ladies? Wink, wink. Jeez. So Democrats go hard at women. They promise to be the husband of their dreams when really, again, like I said, they want to prostitute you out. They don't want to partner with you. They want to be your pimp. That's it. That's why in all of their latest efforts to advertise this, there's been no presence of any kind of men or dads in this whole Life of Julia 2.0 stuff. Why do Democrats do all of this? Because they want people to depend on them for their sustenance and well-being. It's easier to control you. When you control what someone's sustenance, when you control their food, when you control their housing, when you control their health, you control that person. And more than anything, that's what Democrats want. And they actually believe that they deserve it because they're better than you are. They're morally superior to you. And as I said, they think you're dumb, too dumb to manage your own life. And so you have to be told what to do. And you're going to like being controlled anyway, even if you don't know it yet. Now, speaking of dumb, I'm going to show you how Democrats have dumbed down this plan they're counting on you not reading, since it's a bajillion pages long and stuffed with things that have nothing at all whatsoever to do with any kind of economic structure, infrastructure, or building anything back better. So the White House created a slideshow of sorts. It looks like a coloring book for kindergartners. The slideshow tells the story of the life of Linda. Sit back, kids. It's time for Storybook Hour with the White House, where you're going to learn how the government intends to take care of Linda's needs for a lifetime. So first off, you're probably like, okay, who the hell is Linda? We don't know. She's just your average butchy, kind of lumberjack-looking mom from Peoria, Illinois, who also happens to wear a leather tool belt, because this White House is bravely shattering stereotypes, don't you know? So Linda's not your average soccer mom in a minivan relying on some toxic masculinity man to make her way through the world. Heck no. Linda is out earning the bacon and breaking glass ceilings with her handy hammer down at the cement factory in Peoria. The first image reads, quote, Linda is a working mom in Peoria, Illinois, and she works at the local manufacturing facility as a production worker, and she earns $40,000 per year. Now, she's also pregnant with her son, Leo, end quote. Now, just so you know, the average salary in America is $66,000, but that doesn't help the White House plans for a nanny state or this dumb story. So Linda makes $40,000. That's it. That's all you get, Linda. Next slide says, quote, once Leo is born, Linda begins receiving tax credits of $300 per month or $3,600 annually to help cover essential costs like groceries, rent, and medicine, end quote. Where's Leo's dad, you might ask? You know, Linda's husband? Who knows and who cares, I guess, I mean, in this fictional story, because men are irrelevant. I'm surprised that a woman even exists. Honestly, I would not be surprised if Linda was actually Lenny, identifying as Linda. I mean, that's kind of how it's been going, right? Is this part of the White House's national strategy on gender equity and equality? Is that what this is? I mean, they did show us that you never utter the words man, men, or boys ever. So Leo has no dad. He is like probably, what is he, like some kind of quasi-immaculate conception? She just like tapped her toes twice and said some feminist stuff and boof, a baby. Linda has no man, and that's exactly the way Democrats like it, because Uncle Sam's your man, ladies. Woo! The life of Linda's story continues and tells us about Leo, the boy born from Uncle Sam into government dependency, so he too can get hooked on this sweet free milk coming from Uncle Sam's teat. It's possible. Quote, as Leo grows up, the government helps cover the costs for his daycare, guaranteeing that Linda doesn't need to pay more than 7% of her income on childcare, end quote. See, the answer to Linda's problems couldn't be marrying a capable, good man and providing the two-parent nuclear home, which according to all studies and research is the key to getting ahead in life. Or actually, Linda could also do this herself and not have to be on Uncle Sam. You see what I'm saying? Not just for the married couple, but also for the kids. It benefits everybody. If Tool Belt Linda, aka Lenny, provided a stable two-parent home for Leo, perhaps she wouldn't need the government to raise her kid. And you know what? Here's the other thing that angers me. As somebody who was raised by a single mom, women don't always necessarily have to have. If something happens unforeseen in life, women are empowered enough to fit into those circumstances and rise to that challenge. They have, but the government never ever wants them to believe that they can, because government wants to be your pimp. But now, never mind that. See, the Biden White House has really made moms mad by pushing critical race theory and masks on kids. So they really desperately hope that this is the package that's going to win those suburban moms back. Because remember, in the 90s, you had soccer moms. In the early aughts, you had the security moms. And now you have the school board moms. And so they're thinking that they can lure ladies back with some free government stuff that women, and they're really being sexist here and trying to prey on single moms, can't resist. So back to the life of Linda. When Leo turns 3, as the story goes, he attends a high-quality pre-K for free. Oh boy, I can't wait to see what kind of books he reads. By the way, you know what? We found some pretty crazy books in the Keller High School here, just in the area that I live in. I'm wondering if it's going to talk about male-on-male romantical times with full pictures. Still no word on where Leo's dad is, but who cares, right? This high-quality pre-K, that's the thing to focus on here. High-quality pre-K H2O. It's like a Billy Madison, not Billy Madison. It's like that, what is it? Waterboy, thank you. It's like the Waterboy movie, right, with Fairuza Balk. What happened with her? She was great. Just like that high-quality DMV experience that the government delivers and those high-quality public schools, high quality that parents are totally happy with right now. Have you seen the happiness? They can barely contain it. I mean, police have to be called. Or that high-quality post office that loses your mail and also billions of our dollars each year. Because the government is all about high quality. High-quality exits out of Afghanistan, too. And speaking of high-quality government-funded pre-K, will it include teaching Leo that he's an oppressor? Will it expose Leo to drag queen story hour? Anyway, back to Linda's fatherless son, Leo. He's still living off the government largesse in an attempt to replace the father that should have provided a role model for him and financially supported him. Quote, when Leo leaves high school, he's able to enroll in community college thanks to extended Pell Grants and investments in community college, end quote. So translation, free college for Leo, courtesy of Uncle Sam. Given that every single college in America is an indoctrination camp for leftism, Leo is more likely going to learn how to be a deadbeat who loves living in a hippie commune, writing things like zines, weaving things with hemp, and growing up to be Bernie Sanders, where he smells like patchouli and drives an old Volvo, than actually gain any kind of real-world skills from community college. I just described one of my teachers from community college. He's more likely to also learn about his toxic masculinity and his white privilege or white adjacent privilege in order to explore his gender fluidity, then learn to screw in that thingy that he's screwing in that photo, whatever that is. But you know what? That progressive education is designed to make Leo hate America, and it should land him a sweet gig. So that's right, Leo gets a job protecting Mother Earth by putting up giant windmills that kill endangered hawks and eagles. And totally serious, like those windmills kill a ton of birds. It's just like a shredder for birds, meat grinder for birds. Birds everywhere. But I digress. Let's read up on Leo's sweet new union gig. So of course, Democrats love unions because they own them. It says, quote, Thanks to his community college training, Leo lands a good paying union job as a wind turbine electrician. Of course he does. Wind turbine electrician. God bless. No, America, don't actually. Leo's new job is one of $4 million a year that are supported by President Biden's Uncle Sam Pimp plan, end quote. Now, since this whole thing is just commie fiction, the White House just makes up numbers of jobs, like 4 million. We're just going to make it up. That the Biden economic plan is going to magically create. Still nothing on Leo's deadbeat dad, actually. We don't really know what his story is because men don't exist in the Build Back Better America, nor do they exist in the National Strategy on Gender Equity and Equality. So how do you feel about that, moms? Seems dads just aren't important, according to the Biden administration. We can't and should not expect much from them. But we should expect a lot from that faithful and dependable hanger-oner called Uncle Sam. And quick aside, too many men are all too willing to accept this particular progressive big government deal with women, by the way, anyway. Right? Men, you're competing against Uncle Sam here. You know the deal where men get, lots of casual sex, just get to make all kinds of babies but don't have to raise them? Deadbeat dads love deadbeat Democrat plans for the deadbeat government to raise their kids for them while they run off and do bro stuff. I mean, seriously, have you seen some of the ads like talking about health care and no responsibility for women in the past 10 years from Democrat administrations? See how all this works? Like, women, y'all sure this Build Back Better plan really actually looks out for you and your best interest? And is it really about empowerment if Uncle Sam has to hold your hand literally every step through the way? And despite all the talk about this fictional fatherless boy named Leo, Linda's son is lucky to be alive. Because in truth, honestly, if we were going with statistics from someone this far left, Democrats would really love it if Leo were aborted for any reason at all. But that's too gruesome of a reality to turn into a storybook slideshow aimed at adults that read books for kids. So in the final slide in the White House Storybook Hour, Mr. Biden's neighborhood, we see Leo strolling with his now old mother. Leo and his old elderly mother have been dependent on the government their whole lives at every single point. Leo dutifully votes Democrat since he can't bite the hand that feeds him. And once again, Linda's husband, Uncle Sam, is there for her while Leo's biological dad is chasing hookers in Vegas, presumably. Maybe his name's Beto. We end with this final feel-good slide. Quote, later in life, Linda needs home care and hearing care. Thanks to President Biden's plan, because he's apparently forever president, Linda can access affordable hearing care through Medicare, and Leo is able to afford at-home elder care for his mom, end quote. So Linda lives out her golden years on the government dime and presumably dies after being abused in a nursing home in the warm and caring lap of her husband, Uncle Sam. This is not funny. This is serious stuff, people. The end. Actually, it's just the beginning. It's the beginning of a lifetime of government dependency for Linda and Leo and millions of American women. And remember, that which you are dependent on is that which controls you. Uncle Sam wants to replace your hand as the hand that rocks the cradle as the hand that rules the world. Unlike Leo's dad, who doesn't seem to exist in the life of Linda, Leo's government baby daddy, he's a real son of a bitch. Because Uncle Sam is nothing more than a government pimp looking to marry a few million moms. In exchange for free everything, ladies, you're gonna have to do exactly what your demanding husband, Uncle Sam, says, even if you have a headache. He makes the rules, after all, because you're totally dependent on him for almost everything. And that's just the way marrying the government works. Sorry, that part is in that Build Back Better plan, but it's in the fine print. Little bitty tiny, right next to the disclaimer about it not actually being free. Ron Klain, the White House chief of staff, kind of blew that when he said it was actually twice the cost of the New Deal. He did that today. Great job. And if you've noticed, Uncle Sam isn't too nice to moms these days. He's fond of abusing them, treating them like domestic terrorists. And he plans on injecting your children with experimental medicines, with or without your approval. And of course, Uncle Sam would much prefer if you just didn't even have your kid to begin with, ladies. Less responsibility for you. He's worried about global warming, which is really just income redistribution. And that little brat Leo is just one more hungry carbon footprint that the world has to deal with. And of course, he's a dude. Ugh, toxic. But if you do keep Leo, Uncle Sam expects you and your illegitimate Leo to toe the party line. And that means just sucking up to the state for a lifetime of government dependency. And that's exactly what Uncle Sam, Aunt Nancy, and the Democrats want. And not just for women, but for all Americans. So coming up, we continue the conversation with the propaganda coming out of the administration with Dr. Nan Hayworth. So wait until you hear the plans. The CDC has to educate you stupid vax-hesitant people who are unvaccinated and killing people still. Keep it here. Black Rifle Coffee Company is a veteran-owned company that makes coffee. You probably knew that by their name. And they serve premium coffee to people who love America. They developed their explosive roast profiles with the same mission focus that they learned while serving our nation. Every time you buy coffee with Black Rifle Coffee, they give back. So they donated over 6 million cups of coffee to veteran, law enforcement, and first responder causes in 2020 alone. Their high-quality coffee beans are imported all the way from Colombia and Brazil and roasted very carefully at their facilities in Tennessee and Utah. They have a signature roast called Lava Panther that I haven't tried because I'm too busy drinking the Halloween stuff. So, although the temperatures are kind of cooling off, it's 71 degrees. Don't forget to keep enjoying the great outdoors fueled by Black Rifle Coffee, and the best way to do it is join the coffee club. For the love, when you join, they send it to your house. They practically make it for you and deliver it to you while you're still in bed. They don't, but they practically do. That's my disclaimer. You also get special discounts and gain access to exclusive products and more. Purchase at blackriflecoffee.com/DanaTV and use code DanaTV at checkout for 20% off your purchase and your first coffee club order. Welcome back. As we just discussed, the Biden administration has kicked government propaganda into full gear as they push on for their Build Back Better agenda. That's Whole Life of Linda. That's totally an echo of Life of Julia from Obama during the Obama years, selling Obamacare. Julia's, I think, still looking for her Obamacare plan. It seems like the CDC is also planning to help educate the dumb, unvaccinated American people. For real. Here's CDC Director Rochelle Walensky speaking to this just the other day. Watch.
We believe it is very important to get these people vaccinated. There is a plan, should these people not want to be vaccinated, towards education and counseling to get people the information they need so that they are feeling comfortable in getting vaccinated.
So educating and counseling the unvaccinated? I did not see that coming. Pun intended. Seems very Orwellian given everything that we know about the CDC and how they follow the science. Joining me now to break all this down is Dr. Nan Hayworth. She's a former New York Congresswoman and was the first female physician in Congress. And she's also with the Independent Women's Forum. Dr. Hayworth, thank you so much for joining me. Good to see you. I don't think I want counseling from the CDC. They say to follow the science, but they can't even get pronouns correctly. What's your response to hearing that?
It is of great concern to me, as it is to you, Dana, to have the threat of losing your job and your livelihood coupled with this use, I don't know, just even use of the term education counseling. We're going to educate and counsel you, and if you make the wrong decision nonetheless, you're going to lose your job. Well, that's not education and counseling, that's coercion. So I find it all alarming, and you can look at it from many different perspectives, but certainly just scientifically. If this were Ebola virus, God forbid, then I could understand why we would have a 5-alarm program going on to get everybody vaccinated. That's not COVID. And so there's no scientific reason to do this, and there's every reason constitutionally not to have this kind of precedent. But as you and I both know painfully well, Dana, this is not an administration that is at all worried about our constitutional rights in any form.
This also, Dr. Hayworth, used to from this party, we would hear that, the patient's relationship with their doctors that's a sacred thing. That was a sacred relationship. You need to be able to trust the medical professionals that you see. And what gets me is I've spoke every doctor that I see annually and my children's pediatrician, I've talked with each of them in depth on all of these developments with these vaccines. And what really amazed me, the one thing they all had in common is they did not know, they knew about as much as I did with, obviously they had certain medical insight and expertise, But in terms of, things that like long research data that would support or answer some of the questions about adverse reactions, they couldn't answer any of those questions. And it just seems that instead of the government kind of doing this, maybe just, have medical professionals provide them with, just be transparent with them and have them explain it. But they haven't done that. Why is that, you think?
Again, this is an administration that is determined to impose an authoritarian structure on our society for many motivations. And I know we've talked about some of them, but you're absolutely right that the proper way to do this would be to entrust medical professionals and Americans themselves with learning about these vaccines and with making the decision to receive them or not. That's clearly antithetical to what this administration wants to do, which is to mandate these vaccines in any way they can. And federal contractors, of course, now, are looking at vaccine mandates. That's one thing that from the federal level they can do, threaten you with loss of your business with the federal government if you don't vaccinate all your employees. And for what? And people have legitimate questions, Dana, because ever since the beginning of this pandemic, we have seen, I'm a science person, obviously. I have faith in science, but scientists are human beings. And I have lost a lot of faith, unfortunately, in a lot of the people who are at the top of our health science establishment in this country. So it's perfectly legitimate for people to wonder, when is the next bit of adverse information going to drop? I'm not sure I trust this new technology. We do see some adverse effects, especially in young people. I got the Pfizer vaccine. I'm grateful to have had it. It's all good. I think it's good to get the vaccine if you need it. But the role of natural immunity has been completely ignored. We're going to now start mass vaccinating children who, number one, don't need it. And number two, events may show evidence of significant adverse effects in a massive population. The FDA reviewers even said so in their joint call about this.
And Dr. Hayworth, that's one of the key things I was talking about on my radio program yesterday. This one panelist, this doctor, who was saying, well, when we were looking at some of these initial studies, children are going to be affected. If there are adverse reactions, they're going to run the same risks of experiencing those as adults, but yet they are even less affected. And I just remember, doctor, in the early days of this, we were told that children, 5 to 11, the group that they're going for now, they were not developed enough physically to act as, for the lack of a better way to put it, these reservoirs to actually, carry and transmit this virus effectively, if at all. So that seems to, and by mandating this, that's the government that's making a risk assessment for people and their children. For what? I mean, our schools haven't been hot zones of transmission, have they?
Absolutely not. They have not been. And we knew that very early on in the pandemic. That's been a worldwide base of knowledge. Children don't need to be masked. Arguably, they should not be masked. There are harmful effects, especially on young children, of wearing masks, on socialization, on learning. We are in the midst of a massive and dreadfully risky experiment with young children. They have robust immune systems. The few who do not, and again, we don't want any child to perish of any virus, but the few who do not are well known to their parents and to their doctors. Should they be vaccinated? Perhaps so. They'd be the population you might choose. But most children have really robust immune systems. So now we're going to take a virus that has a potent effect. It produces a vigorous effect to that spike protein. And we're going to introduce this into the bodies of children, most of whom have probably had and fought off the virus. Their immune systems are primed. And now we're going to give them a potent exposure. Nobody really knows what the answer to that's going to be in an enormous population. And I understand Pfizer's, I know what pharma research is like. It's quite exhaustive in its own way, but it is not the same. And I know this as well because I've worked with the industry. It's not the same as when an intervention is introduced into the population en masse. This is not what we should be doing. It's in any way. This is just wrong on every level, and I'm very troubled that there are, particularly in the government, look politically and among the Democrat Party, who are pushing for this with all their might.
Yeah. Last question for you, Dr. Hayworth. You mentioned too that a lot of students may have already been exposed to coronavirus, may have already contracted it. A lot of teenagers, young adults as well. We used to talk about antibody tests. When I first went and got my very first coronavirus test, they also did an antibody test. And then I noticed later, whenever I would go to get tested, they didn't do those anymore. Is there a specific reason why we aren't doing antibody tests along with COVID tests? And then if someone, is required to get the vaccine, they can present that test, the antibody test, as, just as good as having the vaccine-induced somewhat immunity? Or is that just, do they not have any standards to verify that? I kept trying to think, is there a good reason why they aren't including that?
The preponderance, let's put it that way, the preponderance of evidence supports the logical expectation, and in fact, this does seem very much to be the case, that natural immunity is superior to vaccine-induced immunity. And I am not disdaining vaccines in any way, but natural immunity is superior. There's no medical reason, there is zero medical reason not to test people for antibodies. It's a certain amount of expense, but frankly, so is mass vaccination of the population. So no, it should be, if people are being asked to be vaccinated or to prove immunity, or to be vaccinated because then we know they'll be immune, by all means, they should absolutely be offered the opportunity to test not only their B-cell immunity, which is the antibodies circulating in your body, those eventually fade away, but your T-cell immunity can also be tested, and that's your body's immune memory. If you have T-cell immunity, that is going to be beneficial to you. And we know that these vaccines, the antibodies fade pretty fast, Dana. So they're not sterilizing immunity. That's why boosters are being offered, especially in vulnerable populations. But T-cell immunity will help you to fight off the virus so that you don't get deathly ill. And that's really kind of the whole goal of this vaccine program.
Wow, that T-cell immunity, that's a good point. I've not heard that raised elsewhere. Dr. Nan Hayworth, always so good to talk with you. Thanks so much for giving us some of your time today.
And you, thank you.
Of course. So coming up next, the legality of this. Dr. Joel Zinberg joins me to discuss that legal authority. Does the White House have any? Does Congress over mandating vaccines, especially for kids? Keep it here. Thanks to Biden's economic policies, job numbers have been abysmal and inflation is skyrocketing. Instead of following the former president's pro-business agenda that had the economy booming, Biden wants to tax corporations and pass trillion-dollar bills we can't pay for. It's time for you to take proactive steps to protect your wealth and retirement by investing in gold and precious metals, and Legacy Precious Metals can help you. Washington continues to print money to pay for their outrageous bills, but all that does is devalue your dollar. Gold offers a hedge against inflation, and as the dollar gets weaker, gold gets stronger. The folks at Legacy Precious Metals are the gold standard when it comes to investing in precious metals. They have a team of experts who can counsel you on the best options for you and your family. Don't leave your retirement to chance. Call Legacy Precious Metals at 866-580-2088 or visit them online to download their free investor's guide full of useful information at legacypminvestments.com. Welcome back. So today is National First Responders Day, and what better way to honor first responders than putting them on unpaid leave? And that is exactly what New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio plans to do to 32% of firefighters and 25% of police officers who are still not yet vaccinated ahead of tomorrow's self-imposed deadline. Now, this is just one small example of vaccine mandates and their effect from around the country. 263,200 members of the United States military still have not received even one dose of the vaccine, and they're set to lose their jobs a month from now due to President Biden's vaccine mandate. But the real question is, does President Biden even have the legal authority to make you get vaccinated? Dr. Joel Zinberg is a health and policy expert for the Competitive Enterprise Institute. He's authored a fabulous piece for the Dallas Morning News that says the president does not have any such authority. Dr. Zinberg is a guest on our program now. Doctor, thank you so much for joining us. Good to see you. Really enjoyed your piece as well in Dallas Morning News because it did answer a lot of questions. I mean, first off, the most important one is that no, you say the president does not have any such authority. So are they just banking on I guess probably on the process, the lengthy process it's going to take to have litigation over this and maybe make its way up to SCOTUS? Or, I mean, what is your take on this, and how long can they, in effect, push these mandates without having any legal authority to do so?
Well, so the president has very limited legal authority to require certain people, like government workers or people in the military, to be mandated. But the important thing to remember is that under our Constitution, the federal government is a government of limited enumerated powers. So while the federal government and the state and local governments share some authority over the public health, it's historically, traditionally, and via the Constitution been largely regulated by the state and local governments. They are the ones who regulate public health, safety, and welfare under their police powers. And those are powers that are reserved to them by the Constitution. So the federal government does not have those sort of broad powers. They can only function under the powers that are listed in the Constitution. And there's nothing in there about vaccine mandates or general public health type thing. So you, at minimum, there's a constitutional question. And in addition, there's a question on where's the statutory authority to do this? The president can't do this on his own. He needs to have some sort of statutory authority given to him by Congress to impose these sorts of mandates. And I argue in that piece and other places that the government trying to impose a vaccine mandate on workers in private industries around the country is an overreach of authority, both constitutionally and under the statute that they relied on, which is the Occupational Safety and Health Act, otherwise known as OSHA.
And that was, of course, they raised a lot of, created a lot more questions last week when it was discovered that they had revised one of their CFRs to eliminate reporting of any adverse reactions. And even though I always say, even though it's rare, it doesn't necessarily make it rare to someone else, or if it seems anecdotal, if it happens to you, it's not necessarily anecdotal. But that seems, it seems of a struggle to say that this is about safety and health if we're eliminating reporting of any kind of reactions of any mandated injections, especially for government workers, but even so in the private sector too, to enforce something like that. I mean, do they even can they do that without an act of Congress? I mean, there were a lot of people asking questions.
No, so there have been two real instances of government overreach during the pandemic, where there was no real statutory authority. The first was the eviction moratorium that was promulgated by the CDC back in September of 2020. And that was renewed multiple times until finally the Supreme Court had to rule that they had gone beyond the CDC had gone beyond its authority under the Public Health Service Act to order that, because basically the types of things the Public Health Service Act listed to limit infections and limit the spread of communicable diseases were not the types of things like vaccinations. They were things like fumigation, destruction of diseased animals, quarantines, but there was nothing like vaccination. So the Supreme Court struck that down. Now, the federal government might arguably have had some authority under the Public Health Service Act to impose vaccines. It's questionable, but it's certainly better. But I think the Biden administration decided we had such a bad go with the eviction moratorium, let's look for another authority. So, in both instances, they said well before imposing these mandates that they thought they lacked authority, but they went ahead anyway. So they chose to use OSHA, and that's a very unlikely type of authority to rely on, because OSHA is meant to regulate workplace safety. And it's meant to protect against the types of hazards and substances that you encounter in a workplace, chemicals, things that are flammable, things that cause cancer. It's not really meant to protect against infectious disease. The only time they've actually imposed any sort of mandate dealing with infectious disease, they have what's called the blood-borne pathogen protections or standards. But there they don't impose a vaccine mandate. The most they do is they say that employers have to provide access to hepatitis B vaccines, not that they have to mandate that their workers take it, just that they provide free access to those vaccines. So it's really kind of doubtful that OSHA allows this sort of thing. But even worse than that is, under normal type of rulemaking in this country, we have what's called notice and comment, where the agency would publish a proposed rule. There'd be an opportunity for the public to comment. It can take several months. And then the agency is supposed to adjust that rule based on what the types of comments they receive. The president was saying to OSHA, don't do that. He decided to go with a different type of thing that's allowed under the OSHA Act, which is what's called emergency temporary standards. And that's a much higher threshold to meet. And they're rarely used and even more rarely upheld. And prior to the pandemic, OSHA had issued only 9 ETSs in the 50 some odd years they've been entitled to do so. The last one was in 1983. And 6 of those ETSs were challenged in court. 5 of them were struck down by the courts. So it's not the kind of thing that's done very commonly, and it's a very high standard to meet. And I would argue, I don't think they're going to meet it here, because what they have to show is that there's a grave danger that is presented in the workplace, and they have to show that their standard is necessary to protect against that danger. So the danger is, obviously they're talking about is infection with COVID, but we're now in a point where when we finally have gotten more accurate information, we see that the actual fatality rate, if you were infected with COVID, is somewhere between, say, 0.3 and 0.7%. That's about twice as much as the flu. It's not insignificant, right, but it's nothing like Ebola, where you have 50% of people die, or even smallpox, where a third of the people, before it was eradicated, a third of the people infected died. So there's a question of that. And then when you look at what are the age groups that in the workforce, it goes even lower, because it's been clear for a very long time now that the risk from COVID goes up substantially with increasing age. So if you look at the prime workforce from age 25 to 55, you see that the risk is 1/100% up to about 0.4 at age 25, up to about 0.4 at age 55. So it's actually substantially lower than what I just mentioned before. Then you have to account for the fact that we're now at a point where you have about 2/3 or more of the adult population is vaccinated, fully vaccinated. About 10% more have gotten at least one shot, which provides a fair amount of protection. So a lot of people have been vaccinated. It's much less likely you're going to encounter someone who's infected with COVID and shedding the virus in the workplace. You also have a lot of people who've gotten COVID in the past and recovered, giving them natural immunity. And it's pretty clear that natural immunity is as good or better than the vaccine immunity. So when you put the natural and the vaccine immunity together, you're talking about something like 85% of the population has immunity. So that hardly looks like a grave danger. And then throw on top of that, we have all these new therapeutics that are available. So it doesn't look like a grave danger. And in terms of the second standard they have to meet is the standard necessary to protect. Well, why would you want to impose an invasive procedure like a vaccine when you could have non-invasive procedures that appear to be effective? And I don't have to go very far. I need only look at the fact that in June of this year, OSHA imposed one of these ETSs on healthcare facilities, and they required the facilities to utilize a variety of non-invasive, non-pharmaceutical methods to protect their workers against transmission. So it's things like masks, physical distancing, ventilation systems, things like that. And their justification for that in the standard was that they said these are effective means of interfering with transmission. Right. So if you have these effective, non-invasive means, why don't we use those before we resort to vaccines?
And that's usually what the courts use as a determination into how far they actually go. What's the least invasive, the least intrusive method of all? Dr. Joel Zinberg, really informative. See, we should have you talking to the nation about this stuff instead of some of the individuals that we have out there. Doctor, we so appreciate your time with us. Again, great editorial in Dallas Morning News. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. So coming up, the outsourcing of parenting. I saw this headline the other day. I have some thoughts on parents who allow their children to run wild on social media and then blame social media for the parental neglect when said children get in trouble. Keep it here. The Social Security Administration's computer servers are 45 years old. Computer servers at Health and Human Services are 50. Maybe that's how cybercriminals hack the U.S. Census Bureau's computers where everything about you is stored. The threat of some cyber thief stealing your credit card isn't your biggest risk. Your massive risk is that they take ownership of your home. It's called home title theft, and the FBI calls it one of the fastest growing crimes. Cybercriminals can simply hack into vulnerable government, bank, or mortgage company servers where copies of your home's title are stored. They can forge your signature stating that you sold your home to them and then borrow on your home and leave you in debt. You wouldn't know until collection notices showed up. Protect your most valuable asset and visit HometitleLock.com to register your address to see if you could potentially be a victim. Use promo code RADIO for 30 free days of protection. That's HometitleLock.com, promo code RADIO. This goofy headline from Milwaukee caught my attention. It reads, quote, outrage as Instagram lets bullies post video of boy age 12 using the toilet at school, end quote. So the parents of a 12-year-old kid are rightfully upset that their son was filmed by bullies using the bathroom at school and a video was posted on Instagram. It's a horrible story. But what's up with the headline Instagram lets? Because the question should be, where are the parents? It's the parents who let their kids run roughshod all over social media that are more of a problem than social media itself. Did the cellular service used let the kids post these images? Did whichever brand of phone let students post this? These platforms, including Instagram, are all services. The only variable that let kids post this was their parents. Children who are given limitations and know that serious consequences will befall them if they abuse their devices and engage in such behavior won't choose to behave like this with said devices. Children who are taught how to treat people kindly don't choose to treat people unkindly to the extent of climbing over the bathroom stall wall to film a distraught fellow student as he uses the bathroom. Instagram didn't establish the limits or lack thereof in the homes of the children who bullied their fellow student. The bully's parents did. So I think big tech does a lot of wrong, and while it has way too much power over public discourse, this is not a tech issue. It is a parenting issue. And offloading that responsibility to Silicon Valley is just a cop-out. Parents who shrug off their responsibilities and hide behind big tech, they're part of the problem. Parents who allow big tech to influence their children more than they, the parents, do, they're part of the problem. Lack of attentive parenting is the problem, and everything else, just like social media, is a distraction. That does it for us tonight. Thanks for tuning in. Good night, and don't bend the knee.